have a little bit of fun, little more relaxed. Okay, so couple of new basketball Hall of Famers. We'll start with the far more popular one, Vince Carter. Vince Carter is going to be named Hall of Famer. Looking at his career, his career stat line: 16 points, 4 boards, 3 assists. But the guy was a 8-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA, All-Rookie, Rookie of the Year. He also won the Sportsmanship Award. If that does anything for you. Okay, so obviously he never won anything as far as championships go. He was stuck with Toronto for a while. He was on some of those Nets teams in the early 2000s that were pretty good, but had to run into the Pistons at that time, as well as even like the Pacers were pretty good that year. So it was kind of a tough time. Never ended up winning much with the Nets. Then obviously he becomes basically a journeyman. He's one of those. If you ever played the Immaculate Grid games with the NBA teams, it's like he can probably get you most of those matches. It's like play for Toronto, play for New Jersey, play for Orlando for a season, play for Phoenix for half a season, played for Dallas, played for Memphis, played for Sacramento, and then most infamously, I suppose, played with the Hawks. It's crazy to me that his last season was 2019-2020. Like, that is the weirdest thing in the world to me. I mean, he didn't start by that point, but just the fact that he was still like playing. It was like recently when they announced Rajon Rondo just retired. I'm like, what? I thought he retired like 12 years ago. I thought he retired when Doc Rivers got fired. Like, well, I guess that happened a few times, so maybe that's not the most. It happens a lot, but no, I mean, like, obviously he's particularly a legend in the late 90s, early 2000s for those dunk contests that he did. He was never he had some really good playoff runs. I mean, 2005, 2006, he averaged 30 points, 29 and a half points technically with the Nets. He in 2015, he actually led the postseason in 3-point shooting percentage with 700. He had 11 points a game, but by that point, of course, he was basically a shell of himself. But I feel like at a certain point he was just so dominant from 1999 to 2007. He was certainly considered one of the better players in the league. He was certainly considered a superstar of the league. Obviously, you win a couple of, or you're a 2-time All NBA. He was never a first team All NBA. But he was second and third team multiple times. And then you win the Rookie of the Year. He's just one of those guys. He's just one of those guys that he's a legend. The Basketball Hall of Fame is sort of his own thing. And we'll get into it with the next one because I'm a little bit more emotionally invested. But yeah, let's just jump right into it. So the other one is, of course, Chauncey Billups. Chauncey Billups was finished with the stat line of 15 points, 2 boards, 5 assists. He's a 5-time All-Star, 2004 NBA champion, 3-time All-NBA, Finals MVP, 2-time All-Defensive, and as well, he also won the Sportsmanship Award, if you care about that. But I think there's a little bit more of a case for Chauncey Billups, just based on simply that resume. I mean, one of the better defensive players in Pistons history, obviously, with a 2-time All-Defensive. He was Mr. Big Shot. That was his nickname, Mr. Big Shot. He made the big shots multiple times in the playoffs, in the regular season. He's my favorite Piston of all time. I love Chauncey Billups. He's fantastic. However, hard for me to say that he's a Hall of Famer. Okay, for me, he was a good player, but he didn't really become good and become a perennial all-star until after the Pistons actually won. The Pistons win in 04, right? He was not an all-star in 04. Okay? He was pretty good. He 16 points that year, and he had 5 assists. He was still pretty good. But he didn't reach his peak until, the early or the mid to late 2000s, when the Pistons were basically every single year competing and making the Eastern Conference Finals. They didn't actually win. The other thing about him is is he was drafted incredibly high by Boston, was traded the very year that he got picked to Toronto, and was a journeyman. I mean, he played for Denver for a couple of seasons, played for Minnesota, and then we pick him up, and he just becomes an integral piece. He becomes the leader in a lot of ways of the offense, and obviously Mr. Big Shot, all that. Like if we're just looking at his Pistons career, there's something of a case, but I mean, he leaves, he goes to Denver, has a couple of nice seasons, but then, he's off in New York. He's playing for the Clippers. He comes back, ends his career as a Piston. For me, if I was being super scrupulous about it, I would say no, he's not a Hall of Famer. He's a very good player. He's a legend, number retired in Detroit, one of the best Pistons to ever play. But in the grand scheme of things, there's a lot of players that can put up a career line of 15, 2, and 9. Or 15, 2, and 5, I should say. There was never a point, the highest amount of points he ever averaged in a game was 19. He never averaged 20 points. It's hard for me to just block that out of my memory, I guess. He's a good player, but he's not, I can't give him the Hall of Fame. And obviously he is. I mean, I'm not gonna say, I'm not gonna take it away from him, because it's just what it is. The new standard has been set in the NBA and in the Naismith College Basketball Hall of Fame, that this is just what it is. If you can put up numbers like this, you're a Hall of Famer. And that actually makes me wonder what other players are going to be considered for the Hall of Fame. I mean, I think at a certain point also, you look at the totality of the All-Stars, All-NBA, stuff like that. I don't think Rip Hamilton, who's another guy from that team, I mean, a 3-time All-Star, 2004 NBA champ, he did average more points than Chauncey. But far less win shares. I will have to draw a line if they ever suggest that Rip Hamilton will make the Hall of Fame. I love Rip Hamilton. He's probably my second favorite Piston. I also like Ben Wallace. I love that whole team. That whole early 2000s going to work. Those teams are fantastic. Certainly better than whatever they're putting out now. It's just really hard for me to say, let's even just... Can I just pull up the Pistons as a franchise? I just want to to put him in, say, the category of Bob Lanier and Joe Dumars and Isaiah Thomas, and even a guy like Ben Wallace, who, mind you, was not a scorer at all, but is arguably one of the best defensive players of all time. I think, in my opinion, he probably is the best defensive player of all time. Outside, I mean, there's plenty. I don't want to get into that debate, but we're dealing with we're getting to the point where it's almost basically, if you won a championship, if you were a player that people knew about, you have a good shot of being in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I wouldn't be. It's shocking to me in a way that Bill Laimbeer isn't in the Hall of Fame. Now, I think that's probably because they hate him, but also I don't know that he's really a Hall of Fame player. I mean, only a 4-time All-Star, 2-time NBA champ, and was a rebound champ. He was never an All-Defensive player, never an All-NBA player, anything like that. But all I'll say about this is, I love Chauncey. I love Vince Carter. The Hall of Fame in basketball in particular, and it's becoming that way a little bit in football as well, it becomes a little bit harder to really take that title seriously when I think the quality is a little bit lower. And again, I say that as someone who loves both Chauncey Billups and Vince Carter. I guess I just wish there was something else, right? Something to recognize these all-time great players that aren't necessarily Hall of Fame players, right? I don't want to call it the Hall of Very Good, but I mean, something like the NBA 75, right? And I know that essentially basically all those players are Hall of Famers, but guys that just had an impact. I don't know. I mean, like they already have the All NBA, and that's a while you're playing award, but maybe something like all time NBA or something like that. Like that's something I think that would be more in line with guys like Vince Carter or Chauncey Billups. You know, guys that were when they were good, when they were hot, they were hot. But overall, you look at their totality, their entire line of work, it's fairly pedestrian, especially modern day comparisons. Not that that's entirely fair. Played in different eras, different rules, etc., etc., etc. So, hey there, what you just watched was actually a clip from a larger show that we do every Tuesday night. What are you doing Tuesday night? Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the like button so that you don't miss out on any more of our weekly shows every single Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope to see you there.